All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. For Peter Morgan Alonso, the biggest moment of his MLB career so far came last October when he hit that 3-run home run in the ninth inning of game three of the wild card round to help the New York Mets not only stave off elimination, but ultimately defeat the Milwaukee Brewers and advance. Now, overall, during that postseason run for the Metropolitans, Pete Alonso hit 273 with 4 home runs and 10 runs batted in as New York finished just 2 wins shy of reaching the World Series. Now, after the season, Alonso was set to hit free agency for the first time, but he didn't get the big payday that he was seeking. And at the end of the day, it took some 11th hour negotiations to get Pete Alonso back to the Mets on a 2-year deal, which in reality is a 1-year deal. The Mets took a hard stance on Pete Alonso over the offseason as his agent Scott Boris, didn't get the deal that he wanted. And at the end of the day, the Mets wanted the slugger back in New York, okay, but on their terms. And they didn't want to be strong armed by Boris. And unfortunately for Pete, there wasn't a ton of interest around baseball to drive up his value, okay. Now, there have been rumors, or there were rumors at least, even going back to this past off season, that the Mets could potentially have their eyes on Toronto Blue Jays first baseman Vlad Guerrero Jr., who is set to hit free agency after this season. But of course, that's all null and void right now because you no longer have to worry about that because Vladdy and the Jays recently came to an agreement on that 14-year deal for $500 million. And with Guerrero off the market, along with the fact that the free agency market at first base is looking extremely thin for next offseason. Is this the time for Pete Alonso to cash in? We've seen a very strong start from Pete to begin this season. The Mets, they're 11-7. I know they dropped the series today to Minnesota, but nonetheless, they're right there with the Phillies for first place in the NL East. And Pete Alonso's bat is a big reason why. We're talking about a guy so far, he's hitting 365 with 5 home runs and 21 runs batted in. On base percentage is well above 460. He's slugging over 700, and he has an insane OPS going for himself right now. Some people are going to say, hey, Pete is benefiting from the presence of Juan Soto in the lineup. I do believe that to be true. The respect that Juan Soto commands because at the end of the day, they're not pitching to Juan Soto right now. And at the same time, credit to Pete Alonso. Pete Alonso's capitalizing on that. That's the big thing because, coming into the season, Pete's basically a career 250 hitter. Okay. His biggest season at the plate, if you will, came back in 2022 when he hit 271 and he finished eighth that year in the postseason voting. And then on top of that, he led the NL in RBIs that year with 131 while also hitting 40 home runs. Okay. So it's one of those where I definitely think the presence of Juan Soto in this Mets lineup is helping Pete Alonso. But like I said, credit to him for going out there and taking advantage of it. And I think I've made this comment to some people before, and I'll make it right here on this platform as well. I think right now, Pete Alonso was set up to have the season that many people expected him to have last year as his walk year. I think, like I said, having Soto in the lineup is a factor in it. I think at the end of the day, Pete may be a little bit pissed off that he did not get the big time deal that he was coveting from the Mets, and the fact that it had to, like I said, it had to be some 11th hour negotiating by the parties involved to make it happen. But nonetheless, I think he's happy to be back. I think he wants to go out there and prove his doubters wrong. I think he wants to go out there and help this team win. We're talking about a guy who's well on pace to become the Mets' all-time leader in home runs before the end of this season. So, with all of that said, with Juan Soto in the lineup for the Mets, with the expectations for the New York Mets this season, and the strong start for Pete Alonso, my question is: would or should the Mets look to extend Alonso before the end of this season? I truly do think so. I'm not sure if it's going to happen because, again, Pete Alonso is a Scott Boras client. And you know, Scott Boras, unless you give him a legit offer that he cannot refuse, he's going to allow his guys to hit free agency. Nonetheless, free agency periods overall in recent years, unless it's the big time clients of Scott Boras, have not really worked out like that in recent years. Okay. I think, hypothetically speaking, if there were to be some negotiations between the Mets and Pete Alonso, it would probably have to be over the All Star break. Okay. I do think Pete will be in line to get a multi year deal. It's not going to be a 10-year deal, may not even be an 8-year deal. Okay. But I think he's going to get a multi year deal. I think at the end of the day, Steve Cohen, the Mets team owner, wants Pete Alonso to remain with the Mets long term. I think Pete Alonso wants to be there long term. I think at the end of the day, in a perfect world, Steve Cohen would love Pete Alonso to retire with the Mets. Not guaranteed that that's going to happen. Okay, Pete loves New York, in my opinion. I think he loves the fans there. The fans love him, and I think you have a Met fan base that not only wants to see their team win, they want to see homegrown guys um, achieve records. And they want to see, some of these Met records, be broken. And, the all-time home run record for this franchise, it's held by Darryl Strawberry. Darryl Strawberry has not played for the Mets in 35 years. So I think at the end of the day, Pete is increasing his value with this strong start. He's got to keep it up, of course. Nonetheless, his bat is a big reason why the Mets are where they're at right now because a lot of these guys in this lineup ain't hitting it. So, you know, the baseball season is so long. You have so many ups and downs. You have so many ebbs and flows. Pete's going to have a cold spot, couple of cold spots probably. Hopefully, some of the other guys, pick it up in the lineup. Now, if Pete keeps going, and other guys like a Mark Vientos, like a Brandon Nimmo start to get it going in that lineup as well. That's only going to make Pete Alonso's bat better. Okay, but nonetheless, he is starting to, or he's looking at least to leverage himself in a way that he didn't last year. I know that the Mets are going to probably come back and say, "Well, you're hitting behind Soto now, so that changes things for you." Okay, because teams at the end of the day, when it comes to bargaining, they're always going to give every reason why they don't want to or they don't need to pay you what you're looking for. But I think at the end of the day, I think it probably happens. I know that for the most part, Steve Cohen has stayed out of the way of Mets president of baseball ops, David Stern's way. I don't think he's going to call rank per se, but I think at the end of the day, there's mutual interest by all parties involved. I don't think that we're set up for another game of chicken between Boris and the Mets. It's one of those where I also don't think that the market last year for Pete Alonso humbled Scott Boris. It's his job to go out there and get top dollar for each of his clients, and he's going to try to go out there and do it again. But nonetheless, this time I think um, Pete is having the season that everybody expected him, or most people expected him to have last year. And with that said, um, I think the Mets are going to be the beneficiaries of it, and I think maybe, just maybe, Pete Alonso cashes in next winter in a way that he was hopeful to cash in this past winter. But nonetheless, strong start for Pete Alonso, who looks locked in at the plate. And so far, he has put this Mets lineup on his back. At some point, the other guys are going to step up and join Pete because I do think the Mets have the potential to have a good hitting lineup this season. I think as the weather warms, so will the bats of the Mets. And the crazy thing about it, it's mid-April and Pete Alonso is hitting like this as the Mets have been playing in some cold weather places like Minneapolis this week. But nonetheless, you don't develop a nickname like the polar bear not being able to succeed in a climate like that. But nonetheless, strong start for Pete Alonso. Let's see if he can keep it up and help the New York Mets achieve or reach their aspirations for this season. But nonetheless, fine folks, that's going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank each and every one of you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. And I want to take this time out to thank all of you fine folks for checking it out. And if you like what you heard and saw, please feel free to hit that like button as well as subscribing to this channel. Also, if you're on the X, formerly known as Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it'll be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365, and you can check it out. Drop a line and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. So, once again, fine folks, my name is William Martin, and I am signing off. And I'm saying take care and have yourselves a wonderful day.